Hi everybody, it's Cash. Welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me and welcome to my new cabin-like environment. It gets so noisy in the other place sometimes and it's better to do it here because it's quieter. But today I wanted to tell you what happened when I went into the energy of one of the latest crop circles that appeared in Britain, specifically Badbury Rings it's called, in Dorset. I used this photo that I got off the internet to access the energy. Crop circles have been around for the longest time, back to the 16th, 17th century, I think. People thought they were fairy rings made by invisible sprites dancing around cornfields or wheat fields. But they really came to prominence in the UK in the late 80s or early 90s. Two guys, Doug and Dave they were called, they went on television to be interviewed and said, look, we've been making crop circles. And they had a plank of wood and some rope and they trampled wheat. Done several of these actually, maybe even 200 or so. And people said, wow, that's amazing, we should do that too. And so hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of fake crop circles appeared all over Britain. If you do that in Europe, by the way, in your court, you can end up paying a substantial fine for vandalism. But in England, that wasn't the case. It was a novelty or art, whatever you want to call it, and these crop circles kept appearing. People were baffled by them because of the increasing geometric complexity. What do they mean? Who was behind this miracle? I think there was a competition organised at one point. People were invited to go out and make crop circles in the most authentic way. And I think the winners were military people with a helicopter and a rope ladder and all sorts of paraphernalia. And they got a really, really good crop circle. But not everybody has that, and the local farmers would spot helicopters floating over the field. So what caused these crop circles? Were they all hoaxes? That was the question. Some people said it was ball lightning that caused them. Others said it was the wind or pulses of magnetism coming up from the Earth's core. But in the end, nobody really knows what causes them, I think. The real ones, not the hoaxes. And the mystery is twofold. One, because the stalks of wheat are bent over ground level, but not broken. They look as though they've melted to 90 degrees. But also, if you take a seed of wheat from inside the circle and another one from outside the circle, and you plant them both, then apparently the one you found inside the circle yields way more wheat than the one that you found outside. It's a strange phenomenon, and nobody has really been able to explain what the cause is. Yeah, maybe they're all hoaxes. And due to my journalistic background, I can accept that. Yeah, there are sophisticated means. Or maybe it's done with lasers from space. You know that old Star Wars technology where people would fight with lasers or whatever? Maybe it's that. And it's scientists playing a game with people and practicing their craft, their scientific skills or whatever, testing out their equipment. I did wonder, actually. I remember this way back in the 80s and 90s, whether Doug and Dave weren't decoys. And people were very, very close to finding what the cause of these real circles was. And so they put up Doug and Dave to plant the idea in people's heads that they were all hoaxes. Don't believe this stuff. And then no further inquiries would be made. I did wonder that at the time, but that's not been proved either. So I thought, given that there's been a new rash of crop circles in southern England, I thought I would just go into the energy of one of the photos, that one from Dorset there, and see if anything came. And it was fascinating because the energy I got, and bear in mind this applies whether it's a hoax or not, frankly, this was the energy I felt when I was in it. Immediately, I felt as though my head was filled with wet rice or something. I flopped to the ground, metaphorically speaking, flopped to the ground and couldn't get my head off the ground. In fact, when I went into the energy generally, It reminded me of when you're making bread dough. And you have to knead the dough and you fold it in on itself. It was like that. It was monstrously heavy and dead around me. Then, stage 3 of this, I felt something heading for me. Bear in mind, this is still metaphorical in its way, because it was like a light, a physical light coming for me, and I dodged out of the way in the pictures, dodged out of the way, and it went over there, and then it came back, and I dodged this way, and it went by me, and then went by my head, and it was going backwards and forwards really fast across this area. I couldn't necessarily see it was making geometric shapes. It was just going backwards and forwards very, very fast. And it felt like it carved up the area, and I'm not quite sure why some areas went down and other areas stayed up, which would create the shape, I suppose. But some just went down, as though they sank. And it reminded me, actually, this whole thing, of a 3D printer. You know, when they print objects like guns and faces or whatever it is, it just goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and then the shape emerges. It was so much like that. I don't know there was a literal light going backwards and forwards like this, but it felt that way. It felt that something was moving, and it wasn't like my journalistic instincts say, just somebody with a fancy roller. Or even a laser. It just felt very, very quick and a very heavy energy. And then that was it. You had whatever you had. But given those parameters of the energy and the ball and whatever else, I could see how you could 3D print a crop circle of any kind of complexity. There's a woman called Lucy Pringle who's written a book on it, in fact several books. She is the authority on this subject, and she has a photo in there of this one. This is the photo, and I can imagine that being made. It's not that wondrous when you imagine it to be just this light going backwards and forwards, creating an energetic force that flattens some things and leaves other things as they are. Not that long ago, I was walking along the street. Actually, I tend to walk on grass wherever I can. And you know how you can just walk along and suddenly there's a whole bunch of mushrooms on the ground. And they weren't there yesterday. And I thought, oh, this is fascinating. I'll touch it. You wouldn't eat this thing, but I'll touch it and see what it feels like energetically. And the energy from that mushroom was exactly the same energy I felt when I first went into the picture of that crop circle in Dorset. Heavy, heavy, heavy. I could barely stand up. The mushroom was emerging, developing, growing. And in a parallel way, so was the crop circle. Same energy, heavy, heavy. And touching that mushroom, I realized why you wouldn't eat it. It felt very, very bad. But more than that, it felt like the earth was expelling it, getting rid of something that it didn't want, putting it above the surface so that it could die, wither or whatever. A bit like nature's zits, pimples, or whatever. Getting rid of toxins from the earth. That's what that felt like. And I've not eaten a mushroom since. If it turns out that the crop circle is a hoax, and they're getting very, very good at them, I have to say, but if it turns out that it is a hoax, it doesn't affect what I felt. Maybe there isn't really a light dashing backwards and forwards in real terms. But that heavy energy was there. That sense of barely being able to stand because of what was going on around me. and that it had a 3D printer feel to it. That all seems very, very valid to me. Back in March, if you remember, I went to Sedona on a retreat. And while I was there, I got to stand in an enneagram and also a labyrinth. They were both in somebody's yard. And to my amazement, they're not just stones on the ground. These formations have power. They have energy, and I felt it and got pictures for it. And very soon I'll give you those pictures and tell you how everything worked out. But it shows that these things, while they seem quite innocent, and they're just stones on the ground, really, they can have tremendous power that's unseen and has no source that we can tell. And I wonder if the same isn't true for the crop circles. Even if they're hoaxes, there's something about the geometric shapes that offers a powerful energy to anybody walking in it, either by the method of creation or by their position on the landscape, something like that. But I know how I felt, and that's not how I normally feel walking across a field. This was very heavy energy. I know a lot of people want to attribute it to ETs and stuff. I don't know about that. But there's something more to this crop circle than simply a pretty pattern on the ground. And that applies whether it's a hoax or not. All right, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.